how long you live may have more to do with your choices than your genes. That's today on the Longevity Lab. Welcome into the Longevity Lab. David Lamb here with Dr. Stephen Alstad talking longevity. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
All right, so it seems like forever there was this belief, and as I've said before, my dad died at a relatively young age, so of a heart issue. So forever the belief was, okay, you better watch out. You know, you got those genes, and for a long time that was kind of the prevailing wisdom, wasn't it?
It was. People thought that, demography, basically genetics is destiny, that you really can't escape your genes.
Right.
But you can.
Yeah, but when do you have a sense of when that began to turn a bit? I mean, how recent are these kind of newer understandings?
Oh, those aren't recent at all. It's only the popular perception has changed recently. But we've known that genes play a relatively minor role in longevity since 1920. So it's really old news, but people weren't paying attention to it. They had these anecdotes, these folk stories, like you. Your dad died young, and somebody else, oh, I know this person whose parents lived to be 104, and he's 98 now, and he's still plowing the fields.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, and there's some truth to the fact that genes are more important at the extremes. So if somebody has two parents that died real young of some normal aging gene, that's probably got a higher genetic component. And if people live a particularly long time, like if you have a parent that lived to be 100, your chances of living to 100 are increased by about 20-fold. But for most of us, those of us who expect to live, let's say 70 to 90 years, genes play a relatively small part of that.
Okay, and those this study was published in the journal Nature Medicine, and it's a huge study. Roughly 500,000 people. It included genetic information, medical records, imaging, and then they had another study that had to do with blood samples and proteomics, profiling, and what they came up with was that the choices you make had a greater impact on your longevity than genes, but you don't sound really surprised by the findings.
No, what I am surprised in this particular study is the dramatic difference. Like in this study, genes had something like 1/8 or 1/10 as much impact as lifestyle factors. And from what we know in other studies, genes have about 1/5. But part of this is the nature of the study. So this is a very interesting study in that what they're using is something called the UK Biobank. This is something they started in the United Kingdom, and they got 500,000 people who were willing to turn over all of their medical records, all of their blood samples. They sequenced their entire genomes of all these people. They gave them surveys, and it's turned out to be an absolute bonanza for health research. It's been used in dozens and dozens of papers. Every country ought to be doing something like that. The U.S. ought to be doing something.
Why are we
like
not?
Part of it is our medical record system. The UK, they have the National Health Service, so they have the same electronic medical records everywhere. We have all kinds of different systems, so our systems couldn't even talk to one another, but we ought to be working on that. Germany's got one. Even Saudi Arabia has a 200,000 person Saudi biobank now. And now the lifestyle factors come from surveys, and surveys are sort of notorious for being unreliable, especially if they deal with things that we don't think about a lot. So for instance, if I gave you a single survey and I said, okay, I want you to tell me about your dietary habits. Yeah. And how many times a week did you eat pork? How many times that kind of stuff. And then I extrapolated that to your whole life, even though we did it just one time. There's going to be a tremendous amount of slop in that data. And a lot of this is that kind of slop because they did this one-time survey of all these people and they tried to make what they could. I think that's why the environment came out with such a huge effect. But it's clear that that lifestyle factors are more important than genetics. And there are a lot of people today, people like yourself, that know they have a family history of some certain kind of heart disease. So now what you do is you do what you know is going to keep your heart as healthy as possible. And medically, you monitor that
Right.
a lot more than we would have 50 years ago.
Findings like this, it sounds like this study doesn't do a lot to alter your thinking. But you're not like, the average person walking the street. A study like this, might it have some impact? And kind of because it is such a robust study, it's 500,000 people and make news. Do these news splashes almost like create converts to trickle at a time, so that what's really happening finally gets out there?
Look, David, I'm just a poor scientist. I don't know about that kind. That's your bailiwick. You should be telling me whether that's the case. I'd like to think that that's the case because that's why we do what we do. And that's also why scientists try to communicate what they do to the general public, sometimes successfully and sometimes not so much. But I think articles like this that basically summarize scientific studies are beneficial for the people that read them. Of course, this came out in print journalism, which, I've heard that there were these things once, they were called newspapers.
Relics, relics.
Yeah. So maybe there's another form of media that they could have more, impact.
I don't want to go too far on this rabbit hole, but I do think, and you're very good at this. That's why I've always liked talking to you. What you talk about is complex, but you're able to make it understandable. But you do know not everyone in your field is really good at that.
I do know that, and I try to make a point at all of our meetings that I go to that how important it is for people to learn how to communicate with the general public. And a lot of people are just afraid. I mean, a lot of people that I know in science are afraid to talk to journalists. Yeah. They said, well, they're just going to get everything wrong if I talk to them, and I'm going to look like an idiot. Right. And I'm saying, okay, well, whose fault is that? If they get it wrong, who told them that?
Yeah.
So,
and hopefully podcasts like this where it's just a conversation and we air the whole thing and there's really no editing. All right, so help me understand proteomic profiling. What's that all about?
Okay, so if you looked at your blood very carefully, you'd find that it's got thousands of different proteins in it.
Okay.
It used to be that we only could identify a handful of them. That's why we have blood types. That comes from different proteins in your blood. But with modern technology, we now can identify thousands of proteins in your blood. And those proteins have a story to tell because your blood circulates through all of your organs. It picks up things, cells that are being shed from all your organs. And so if we can learn how to read the signatures for certain things in what's called the proteome, that is all of the proteins in our body, then that could potentially tell us a lot about what's going on, not just with us generally, but what's going on in each organ of our body. So now we have really good ways to not only identify a couple thousand proteins, but then say, well, how much of this is there? And is it going up or is it going down?
So you feel proteomic profiling, great deal of promise with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because proteins, this is where the rubber meets the road in your body. This is where what makes things happen. Proteins run the chemical reactions. They form the structures. That's basically what your DNA does. It makes proteins, right? So, this has got tremendous promise.
All right. So in the study, smoking, physical inactivity, socioeconomic status, major environmental contributors to earlier death and accelerated aging. What are the most impactful steps that individuals and, for that matter, policymakers can take to mitigate those factors?
Well, I mean, if we found a way to reduce smoking, which actually we've been very successful in this country, much more successful than most European countries in reducing smoking, increasing physical activity. We haven't been very good at that, but if part of this is the environment. I mean, one of the things that the blue zones have shown us is that if you change the environment, you can change people's behavior. So making your cities and towns so that physical activity, walking, is easy. It's the easiest way to get around. It's the easiest way to get to things you want to do to shop, for instance. Right. But I come originally from Los Angeles, and that's kind of the epitome of the opposite of this because you can't walk anywhere in Los Angeles.
True.
But yet there's a culture of physical activity in Southern California. So people are always at the gym, at the beach, in front of cameras, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it does motivate you. All right, before we move on to this MIT Technology Review column and discuss that, anything kind of you want to button up about this topic?
No, it's I guess the take home is that you are in charge of your health. You can make it better, you can make it worse, and you probably already know what you need to do to do that. You need to eat right, you need to not smoke, you need to drink in moderation, you need to stay physically and mentally active, and get a good night's sleep if you can.
Yeah, I can't.
I can't either. Yeah.
All right, let's chat about this. And here's this for this the from MIT Technology Review, talking about a tech company that tracked the longevity industry. And it's an individual, Phil Newman, who runs Longevity Dot Technology, a company that tracks the longevity industry. Says he knows of 320 longevity clinics operating around the world. Some operate multiple centers. Newman and his colleagues. I'm jumping around the article. But you can find it if you want to look it up and read the whole thing. Newman and his colleagues conducted a survey of 82 clinics around the world, including the U.S., Australia, Brazil, multiple countries in Europe and Asia. 3/4 of the clients said that most of their clients were Gen Xers between the ages of 44 and 59. Age-wise, does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, well, I guess it doesn't really. That's the age where people no longer think they're going to live forever. They're starting to think about their own mortality, and they're starting to think, can I do anything about it?
Right.
And also, that's the age where people have started to get enough money that they could afford some of the longevity clinics.
And something else about this, 28% of the clinics offered Botox, 35 hair loss treatment, 38 facial rejuvenation, and in terms of the cost, many of these between the $10,000 and $150,000. So an interesting study. Let's dive into this. So in that article, 1/3 of the survey clinics offer stem cell treatments, despite no evidence that they extend lifespan. What is your thought about those stem cell treatments and that taking place in what's billing themselves as longevity facilities?
Well, longevity clinics, and full disclosure, I'm a consultant for one in New York, and actually it starts at $150,000 a year. But I don't give them. All I do is tell them what the science is saying.
Right.
I think like any other thing, there are good ones and there are bad ones. Just like there are good car mechanics and bad car mechanics, and good doctors and bad doctors. Some of these are very, very good. They offer a lot of things that are not proven, but we have no reason to think are detrimental. Things like stem cell treatments, we don't know enough to know whether they could be dangerous in the long or beneficial. Ultimately, I think 20 years from now, stem cell therapy will be very common and will be very helpful for all kinds of things. Right now, we don't have the evidence. We don't have the techniques to know exactly what we're doing. A lot of these stem cell treatments, the more radical ones, you can't get in this country, or at least you can't get legally in this country, but you can go to Honduras and get them and places like that. So I think that generally these are a good thing if you can afford to spend that amount of money.
Right.
It makes you pay attention to your health.
Sure.
And if you pay that much attention to your health, you're going to be healthier because you're going to be thinking every day, am I doing something that's good for me or not?
And another thing about those clinics is you get so much information about where you are, where your health is at the current moment. So, that information may motivate you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine was just in town yesterday to give a talk here. He's also a consultant for the same company that I am in New York. He just went through their whole thing. Well, last time I was there, they offered to do, I want to do that. And I go, nah, it's okay. I'm there's certain things I probably don't want to find out. But he said they took 10 tubes of blood from him.
Goodness.
And he's a doctor. And he said, I had no idea what most of those were about. So whatever they find out, it's not going to be harmful for him. The only downside is if you're getting needless medical treatment, that can be problematic.
And I like what you said, and I haven't heard that as long as it's something that's not detrimental to your health. If it's almost placebo
Right.
effect, and it's not going to harm anyone, what's the harm in getting it done?
Right. I mean, a perfect example of that is this red light therapy.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, I
It
was
is
in.
so hot right now. It's
Is
everywhere.
it? Well, it's hot when you get it too. No, I was in Shanghai a couple of years ago, and I went to one of these clinics because they had paid for me to come over there and look at their place. I wanted to see what they did, so they ran me through all of this, and I looked into it afterwards. I found there's really no evidence to support the fact that it's healthful, but there's no reason to think it's not. And maybe there will be evidence coming out in the future on whether it's healthful or not. But in the meantime, it doesn't hurt anything.
Right. And they're very popular. There are those who are swearing by the benefits. They're all over my Instagram. I can see them readily. All right. According to the survey, most longevity clinics are prescribing medications off-label for aging purposes. Does that concern you?
It doesn't concern me if the drug is something that's the safety profile is already known. So, for instance, there are people that are doctors, lots of doctors that are prescribing metformin to people that don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes because there's some evidence that it has these anti-aging properties. I don't have a problem with that. We know that's a very safe drug as long as the side effects don't bother you. That's not a problem. There are things, though, that are more problematic. Growth hormone, for instance, prescribing growth hormone. Growth hormones treated for growth anomalies, right? Or for muscle wasting after something like cancer chemotherapy.
Right.
But growth hormone can have some real negative effects as well. So I'm not quite so sanguine about doctors prescribing things off-label for things like that could have detrimental effects on their patients, and they don't know.
Right. Yeah. The survey also reveals that 61% of the longevity clinics are not profitable, despite charging between $10,000 and $150,000 annually. What does the economic challenge suggest about the sustainability of these longevity clinics if you're charging $150,000 and not profiting?
Well, if you're charging $150,000, I think it's probably sustainable if you can
Right.
find enough people
Right.
like that. Most of the people that go to this one, it seem to be celebrities, movie people, and all. So that, but yeah, it's a problem. But I think the best ones, and I would say the one that I'm involved with is one of the best. They are looking for ways to democratize their setup. They don't like only appealing to celebrities, but they figure if they have a big celebrity clientele, it's going to attract attention, going to make people potentially pay more attention to their health. And a lot of the people that go there are executives at big Fortune 500 companies. I've been telling them what you ought to do is give them an opportunity to let their own employees experience some of this and see if you can get the costs down and spread the wealth. Because like I say, if you're paying this much attention to your health, you're going to be healthier.
Right. At this point, are most of these clinics in major cities? Because I don't know that we have. I don't even know if we have something like this similar around us here in Birmingham.
I don't know either,
Right.
but I'd say yes, they are. And I mean, and I know Phil, the guy that wrote this thing, and I know a number of the people that run these clinics. I know one in Singapore, a couple in Switzerland, this one in New York, a couple in Los Angeles. They're all very legitimate scientists, physicians. And the other thing they're doing is they're taking data on all of their patients. So we're learning more about longevity from the work that they're doing. And so I think ultimately it's a good thing, but like any good thing, you have to watch out for the charlatans.
Yeah. I go to see a doctor a couple of times a year. He runs, especially blood tests, that sort of stuff. But really, it's almost like he's looking for the big ones, the biggies. It's not a great deal of detail. I don't get tons of feedback. He doesn't sit and explain it to me. Should we, as the medical system in the U.S., be looking at getting more out of that information? Because I would think many of things that the findings that are in longevity clinics, those blood tests that my general practitioner could provide similar information.
Yeah, if they were analyzed in the correct way. Right now, they're just looking for major disease things. They're looking at, is your liver functioning properly?
Right.
Are your kidneys working? Is your cholesterol over the moon? But there's a ton more information, but it all comes down to money. Those sorts of things are expensive, and ultimately we hope the cost comes down, like the proteomics that we were talking about before. Right now, that's really expensive to get done because the instruments are expensive. But kidney dialysis used to be incredibly expensive, and it's come down now to it's affordable by most people.
All right. So where do you come down? Because I don't know if there's a longevity clinic around here, but I know there are individuals who can do additional testing, and you can buy, different kind of testing. And there's like these standard rates, 150, 300, 900, like gold, silver, bronze levels. What do you think of that aspect? If you're not ready to, if you can't afford to pay 150 grand, but more information like that.
Well, I think it depends on who's interpreting it. I think one of the things you need to be aware of is having a lot of medical procedures that you may not need. And some of these things can be quite, invasive. So if somebody said, I saw this little spot on your skin and we need to biopsy that. Well, maybe that's true. But if you're getting an MRI every month, like Brian Johnson is,
Right.
then you're liable to discover stuff that's never going to amount to anything, but it's going to bother you.
Yeah.
If you had a tiny tumor that you knew about that was in your liver and doctors knew from years, that's never going to amount to anything. The fact that you knew it was there now,
Yeah.
my thought is you'd want to do something about
Yeah,
it. So
you
you can
would.
overdo this as well.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting better and better. But I also think that this shouldn't just be the purview of physicians. We know enough now to train physician's assistants, to train nurses, people that might have more time to spend with you. Because you wouldn't know what it's like when you go to see your physician. You're on the clock
Right.
when you walk in the door, and they're on the clock.
Right.
So it's not their fault that that's the way it is. But our system needs to change. Right now, it's what those of us in the field call not a healthcare system, but a sick care system.
Yeah, it
right?
is,
Okay, looks like you got a problem here. Let's see if we can fix it. Not let's see how we can prevent you from getting that problem in the first place.
Yeah. The next time you go to DC, well, that's a good conversation to have with them. All right. On today's the MIT review or anything else we've talked about, anything else you want to kind of wrap up and lasting thought from you?
No, I just hope this has been helpful for people that are sort of worrying about their own health. The fact that you're in charge, you can do something about it. It's up to you. Just you know what to do. You've listened to us today. You probably didn't even need to listen to us today to know about these things. So just get out and do it.
Yeah, time to do it. All right, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks so much, and we'll join you. We'll be here next time right here on the Longevity.